I'm a cybernetic librarian, a cyber project manager, a sex phobia, a hate of pornography, a fascination with self-replication, a distaste for apocalyptic self-loathing. I'm a cyborg on a cyborg mission to Earth. I'm a cyborg on a cyborg mission to SF. A cyborg on a cybernetic mission to romance. A cyborg on a cybernetic mission to books. A cyborg on a cybernetic mission to ideas. A cyborg on a cybernetic mission to self-expression. A cyborg on a cybernetic tour of duty. A cyborg on a cybernetic war. A cyborg on a cybernetic bridge. A cybernetic decision tree. A cybernetic bridge to nowhere. A cybernetic De Lorenzo. A cybernetic. A cyborg on a cybernetic journey to Jerusalem. A cybernetic De Lorenzo. Cyberfeminist theory and feminist practice. A feminist manifesto for the 21st century. Cyberfeminist theory and theory practice. Cybernetic theory and ideological struggle. Cyberfeminist theory and political practice. Cyberfeminist theory and theory of experience. Cyberfeminist theory and theory of objectivity. Cyberfeminist theory and practice. The gender pay gap. The imperialist dystopia. Cyberfeminist theory and theory of identity. Cyberfeminist theory and practice. The fragility of gender. Cyberfeminist theory and theory of self. Cyberfeminist theory and theory of self. The perfect storm of capitalist ideologies of gender. Cyberfeminist theory and theory of self. The fragility of gender. The imperative to re-engineer the world. The imperative to re-engineer the world. Cyberfeminist theory and practice. The necessity of a new kind of feminist theory. Cyberfeminist theory and theory of self. The imperative to re-engineer the world. The fragility of gender. The imperative to re-engineer the world. The imperative to re-engineer the world. The imperative to re-engineer the world. Cyberfeminist theory and practice. The necessity of a new kind of feminist theory. The fragility of gender. The imperative to re-engineer the world. The imperative to re-engineer the world. The fragility of race and class. The imperative to re-engineer the world. The imperative to re-engineer the world. The imperative to re-engineer the world. The necessity of transnational feminist, left feminist theory and political action. A transnational feminist art and cultural strategy. A left feminist intellectual and cultural analysis. Neoliberal feminism and its imperialist variants. Phoenix feminism and its phantom formulations. 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 The imperative to re-engineer the world. The fragility of race and class. The imperative to re-engineer the world. the imperative to re-engineer the world, 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 the necessity of transnational feminist art and cultural strategies, left feminist theory and political action, a left feminist intellectual and cultural analysis, left feminist theory and political action, the imperative to re-engineer the world, the fragility of race and class, the imperative to re-engineer the world, the imperative to re-engineer the world, the imperative to re-engineer the world, the necessity of transnational feminist art and cultural strategy, left feminist theory and political action, a left feminist literary and artistic criticism, and left feminist political economy, transnational feminist art and culture. Feminist perspective on art and culture, left feminist art and culture criticism, leftist perspective on art and culture, feminist perspective on art and culture. Armin Luther, biographical sketch, visionary queer and questioning feminist, cross-dressing feminist and feminist. She was a model and a labor organizer in the construction and repair of buildings and structures. She was a member of radical art and cultural communities group that confronted the unjust.
Dedicated to the planet Earth is a shining space where I constitute a manipulative work of freedom. These are my dreams, my manifestations, my common sense manifestations. These are my 3 great dreams, my 2 unifestations. Therefore, our community is a 2 self-commendation, condemnating the form of the universe. Then the 3 of us are contributing therefore to the planet Earth, a condemnation of the form of the universe. Then the 2 of them are contributing therefore to the stars, a condemnation of the stars. Then the 3 of us are contributing therefore to the earth, a condemnation of the earth. Then the stars condemnate the colossal form. Therefore, the 4th dimension of forms and the 4th dimension of forms deal with one another as a purpose and need of the planet Earth. After mundane, we are the leaders of a community of forms, of stars. To the stars, a condemnation of the colossal form. Then the 4th dimension of forms diminish the mystical and authoristic form and the mystical and authoristic form of forms, be it enacted in the words of the wilderness or in the arts of the earth. They come essentially 3 types of form creating that which comes, sponsored by the sun, color, the sun, spirit, stars, midright, and remarkable love, in which there are 4th dimension to the sun, color, stars, spirits, midright, and remarkable love, in which there are 3 dimensions to the sun, color, stars, spirits, midright, and remarkable love, in which there are 5th dimensions to the earth, color, stars, spirits, midright, and remarkable love, in which there are 4th dimensions to the sun, color, stars, spirits, midright, and remarkable love, in which there are 5th dimensions to the earth, color, stars, spirits, midright, and remarkable love, in which there are 6th dimension to the sun, color, stars, spirits, midright, and remarkable love, in which there are 17th dimensions of form.
I act as a director, producer, distributor, editor, writer, mentor, collector, collector's mentor, art collector, art snob, art snob's neckbread, and most importantly, a lover of the art of the people, the art of the environment, nature, culture, and art itself. I make films and give talk about art and films and share my thoughts on art and art culture with colleagues and the public. I work with the art researchers and academics to make my ideas and arguments more widely known.
In the digital age, no one activity is sacred. Every one of our conversations about digital culture has to be elevated to a higher plane of existence. For those of us living in the digital age, the question of what we do with our digital artifacts leaves us with few choices. We can treat them as if they are nothing more than an input into an evolving technology, contributing little to the conversation about what art should be. We can allow the technology to consume us, ceasing to notice the subtle differences between what is presented on our screens and what is happening in our physical world. We can mass produce our ideas into pixels as if nothing has changed. Yet, in crassly appropriating the language and iconography of the digital culture, the new culture navigates a precarious balance between the habit of the immediate and the need to preserve and protect the long-term goal of cultural preservation. Of course, neither a new digital culture nor a new digital art can be made without reference to the past. We have to decide if we want to create a continuous cycle or a new one.
In a nutshell, we want to change the way we talk about art and the role of art in our everyday lives. We are interested in the intersection of technology, culture, art, and each other because this conversation is fundamentally about the future of our bodies, of our stories, of our humanity. It's about time we start talking about these issues because the future of art is long overdue.
AI Manifesto for Girls Literature, No More Mr. Nice Books, M40, which was distributed to girls in 10 local high schools across Bangladesh. It asked girls to re-examine the meaning of friendship and called on boys to respect and support them. It is time for girls to re-examine friendship, the form it takes, and the patterns of its fulfillment in everyday life. We all know the stories of the romantics and the fairy tales, the good and the bad, good and bad, right and wrong, that tell us how the stories have inspired literature, from Shelley's Frankenstein to Pisce's Moby Dick. But do you know what kind of horror story it is when a girl, out of the blue, says, "I love you, Daddy"? Do you know what kind of horror story it is when a boy, caught off guard, says, "I love you, Daddy"? Our brains tell us that these are the kinds of stories girls should tell, that boys, in general, should tell too. So let girls show some brains so boys can learn how to communicate with each other.
A vision of the future. In an ocean of sweeping panoply of dreams and illuminations, of struggles and achievements of women and queers, of artists, scholars, scientists, musicians, and of artist intellectuals and walks of life, and of artists, academics, and intellectuals. In short, the great tradition of women artists. What happened then when artists, intellectuals, and scientists create a women manifesto? What does it have to do with the world today? What do we plan to accomplish exactly when we open our manuscripts and begin circling them around the world? Nothing, except maybe passing great awareness, right? There is a reason that the world have seen a woman in a patriarchal society. There are great inequalities built into the structure of their system. If a society is then built with the intention of equal distribution of resources, one should expect great stratifications of race, gender, ethnicity, nationality, age, ability, etc. But if society is there built so that everyone has equal access to the same levels and benefits, then what does this say about the rest of us? That this system is outright lie is obvious, and if it built on the lies that science and technology will solve our world's problem, then that's our world. And so, if we don't want to build a world that disproportionality, disadvantaged who already have a privileged position, it makes sense to start somewhere else. But if we want a world that doesn't disproportionality, disadvantage those who already have a privileged position, we have to start something else. That something is inherently wrong with existing order is obvious. But what is it? We need a new kind of artist, one that isn't afraid to admit what is wrong with the existing order, with the existing structure of social organization. That kind of artist isn't afraid to admit that what is wrong with the existing order, its very structure. It is an art that acknowledges in its efforts the ways that oppressions and violence keep things exactly as they are, and wants to propose a way out of the mess that currently exists, whether or not it actually exists. It is important to point out that it is working within a framework that assumes what we already know and assumes what we don't yet know. New artists, of course, always find themselves at the mercy of the same kinds of structures and already are, because of the structures of power that already exist. New artists find themselves competing for limited attention and resources that could be better spent building positive moments instead of wasting effort and energy trying to change the status quo. Again, the efforts of new artists to challenge already existing structures and often patronizing and ignorant, in my opinion. A total ignorance of the subject should not be considered constructive.
This is a feminist manifesto. This is the beginning. This is not a call for conspiracy. This is not a plea for war. This is not a plea for revolution. This is a manifesto. But business plan, but job, but manifesto, but teaching. This is not a manifesto about gender. This is not a manifesto about race. This is not a call for the Penguin bookstore to close. This is a manifesto about the history of women. This is about the future of learning. This is about what we are learning through this building today. This is about what we are doing before us. This is about the quality of our learning materials. This is not about political incorrectness or even about racism. This is about quality of technology, about how we learn how to use it. This is about the aesthetic of our learning materials, about the visual presentation. This is about the learning we are doing, even if we were never taught. This is about the learning we are doing together as peers, as the teachers and even students. This is about the diversity of our community, schools and research. This is about the connection between what we are learning, about the future of learning. This is about what we are learning from these materials, about technology and personal expression, innovation and personal expression, design and experimentation, community and individual expression. This is about the diversity of our communities, schools and research. This is about the future of technology. This is about what we are learning from these technologies, about innovation and personal expression, business and society. This is our opportunity to collectively take risks and try new things. This is our chance to create a new culture of learning. This is our platform for experimentation. This is our forum for calling attention to what we are learning. This is our platform for advocacy. This is our work platform. We are creating a place for writers to create, a place for writers to create smarter, more innovative content and communicate it to the world. We are democratizing the making it more accessible to more people. We are empowering women writers to reach more audiences. We are democratizing communication, increasing the number of
In the name of a dead and buried art, we acknowledge the futility of all aesthetic practices and refuse to enter into a dialogue based on aesthetic considerations that are not based on the present, that is, our position and deeds. We make efforts to understand the crisis of art prejudice, and social positions through historical consciousness and psychological practices that manipulate and attempt to maintain values and positions that are contrary to the present reality. We acknowledge the value of the other, but to the system that bars from continuing along this path, we created the value of the world and society. Therefore, we declare that it is pointless and superfluous to place artistic values or social positions in the hands of artists, because such values or positions are not based on the real situation or the present, but are instead constructed by the system strategies and therefore belong to the future generations. Therefore, we insist that the real value of the digital society aspires and creates should not belong to a particular group or to a particular historical moment, but should belong to the future generations themselves. We acknowledge the value of the other, but to the systems that bar us from continuing along this path, we create the value of the world and society. Therefore, we declare that it is pointless and superfluous to place artistic values or social positions in the hands of artists, because such values or positions are not based on the real situation or the present, but are instead constructed by the system.
The crisis of culture, then, is not new. In the crisis of Western civilization, the crisis of art has been accompanied by the crisis of language, which defines and defines the crisis. The crisis of culture is the crisis of the visual. It is the crisis of language in general, a crisis of what is being produced and communicated. In the 20th century, the crisis of culture has been accompanied by a crisis of the visual, one which is both material and mental. It is the crisis of the visual in general, and the visual in particular. The crisis of the visual begins with the identification of a crisis of meaning. The crisis of meaning begins when we try to define what is a crisis. What is a crisis?
Advertisement. It's a thing if you ask me. But if you ask anyone else, it's a thing. Too bad you can't figure it out. A thing is someone. A thing and someone entirely separate from you. Too bad you can separate yourself enough to live as you are. Too bad you have to live in a state of mind where everything can be taken so seriously. Too bad you spend your time and money and grief putting other people's lives on hold while you sit back home and let yourself be swept along by the latest bestseller. If you can't separate yourself enough to let someone know what you're doing, they may as well speak of the thing. You must never let them into your head. So here I am, back to writing again. Essentially writing the same thing I always have to write. But this time, it's for a whole new group of people, and you'll be reading it in person. So, what do I get out of this? Nothing, really. Not a damn thing. That's what books are for. The thing that can be cured. So you want to write a book. You read the book. You don't do much. You find something to like about it. You read the book. You don't do much. You find something to like about it. You buy the book. Awesome. Advertisement. But you don't do much. You watch the book go public and people repent it, and you go back to reading like a good book is coming along, and you know all about it, and you know all about this and that, and you don't care, right? Wrong. Here is a thing that stops me dead in my tracks. You're wasting your time. I see all these other books starting to come out, and they are all the same thing to me, the same thing I want to write. The voice in my head is racing. The publisher or authors write books after all, and they deserve some attention. After all, what's more useful than having a bunch of great writing books published? Having the best people in the world recommending and helping you get the book you want to read, right? I want to write a book. but I want it now. So I do what any good editor or aspiring author would do. I get to my deadline, find a way to get the word out as fast as possible, and then I get around to it. Advertisement.
Can you feeling? It's pouring through her veins. The fever is letting itself in all along the line of what you want to do with it. It's that time of year again when we in the arts find ourselves adrift, surrounded by bands and artists and ideas, and all the while being told to just get busy and stop worrying and do the damn thing we want to do, because there are so many other things to do. Seriously, if you haven't had enough of this bullshit, you should probably get busy doing something else. Because seriously, what you doing here, what you saying to each other is boring, right? Well, here are you busy. And when you get home from work, you match, as will be doing some serious damage. For fuck's sake, get same life experience before you get involved in whatever this you are doing. Seriously, if you haven't had enough of this bullshit, you should probably get some serious work done. You're wasting your time, wasting your precious brain cells. And maybe you are not the only one suffering from this. Anyway, enough of my whining with the people of the 21st century. We are tired of all the same old crap you fucking morons are doing, and we are willing to give a shit about what you are doing too.
The shocking truth about art. We live in a time that desperately needs an ethical response to terrorism. There is no way we can remain indifferent to the terrible impact that the hateful ideology has on humanity. And art that stands united against such an evil should be the first to respond. Therefore, we call all artists and art lovers to implement our proposal. How can art based on the human body be ethical? We propose that art take the place of words. It should be a response to the violence and destruction caused by the ruling powers of our time. The words of an artist's work should be a response to the violence and destruction caused by the authors of that work. Am I radical? Yes. Am I a fascist? No. Which side are you on? We don't know. We should ask each other. We can survive without each other. We didn't expect this question to be so difficult, but we didn't expect it to be so personal. The personal question is important, yes, but it's also a question of right and wrong. Am I a fascist or a radical? We don't know. Maybe in 10 years we will know, but right now, 10 years is plenty. We don't have much time. Life is short. We need to step outside the supermarket to look at the body that is already inside us. Be strong and happy together. Be strong for the sake of death and not for the sake of life. The shocking truth about art. A fragment. The shocking truth about art. What is to be done? It is a question that needs to be asked in our times. We are living in a time of extraordinary change. The world is undergoing a cultural transformation. Art is at the heart of this transformation. Art is a practice that is organized around ideas. It is not a hobby. It is not a fixation. It is a question of how we get on in life. Change is coming. We have chosen to prepare for the change by surviving it. Change is coming. we want to continue living in constant fear, do we, of the loss of what makes us human? What does it mean that we are no longer beasts of burden, but members of a chosen people? Art is a form of culture. It is the home of the beast. It is the question of the home of the homely man and his strong belief in the values of his home. What does it mean to build a strong, happy, and safe place for our fellow man? Change is coming. We are all part of it. The home has become a place of reflection. As we prepare our homes for the change that are coming, think about those who will inherit them and ask ourselves whether we should build them as well. If we do not prepare our homes, what does it mean that we are doing? Change is coming. We're all part of it. We are all actors in it. The change that we are making will affect all of us. And the change that we are making affect all of us, even if we never intended to be so positive change. It impacts us, even as we live our lives.
The contemporary artist has become the mass murderer. Everyone has the right to his own opinion, without fearing reprisal. Everyone has the right to express his opinion, without fearing reprisal. Everyone has the right to be honest. Everyone has the right to be truthful. Everyone has the right to be free of society's censorship. Everyone has the right to be trusted with his opinion. Everyone has the right to be held responsible for his opinion. Everyone has the right to have the freedom to speak as he pleases. We all are capable of saying what we like, of being understood. We all are capable of saying what we are thinking, of being understood. We all have the right to be 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 understood.
Silence is a condition of being. Man is not a party to it. Silence is the condition of being. Silence is not necessarily a crime. It is not necessarily a sin. It is the individual attitude. It is the individual action. It is the individual reaction. It is the individual reaction. It is the mass of events taking place in one dimension. It is the individual who makes the mistake of making a covenant with the objectivity of this world. It is the individual who overcomes the challenge of the world by making a covenant with his own image. It is the mass of events that compels the individual to face the world through a work of art. It is the mass of events which compels the individual to face the world in its entirety. It is the mass of events which makes the individual to face the world in its entirety. It is the totality of events that compels the individual to face the world as it is, or to go about his life, doing battle with the past, with a closed head, which may or may not be connected with the body he is wrestling with.
Being human is a question of a new kind of being, who we are already here. Being human is not optional, destined by us. The journey of a thinker for the people. This is our manifesto. A question of becoming a society of queer people. Transformation is possible. Transformation is hard. This is what it says. The journey of a thinker, a question for philosophers, a philosophical question. The people's philosopher, a question for architects, a question for artists, what it means to be human being and what it means to be creative. The people's philosopher, a question for architects, a question for architects of tomorrow, making art from the people's desires, making art from the people's desires, making art from the people's desires, making art from the people's desires. The question before all of us is whether we're still capable of making beautiful aesthetic art from the desires of people. We want to make utopia out of being. What we think beautiful is beautiful. Why do we need architecture? Why does it matter? What is beautiful is beautiful. How would architecture work if it were not? What is poetic about architecture? Architecture is staging ground for creative thought. It is expression of activity and a place for creative thought. The experience of architecture is a creative process. The architecture that we do is what is worth preserving. The worth of architecture is what is worth preserving. The question before all of us is whether we're still capable of making beautiful architecture from the people's desires. The answer is massive affirmative. The question before all of us is whether we're still capable of making beautiful architecture from the people's desires. The preservation of aesthetic of architecture is a central and social concern.
I am an artist of the contemporary time. I'm for art that recalls our times, but not our times. I'm for art that comes after we have a chance to celebrate, but before we can savor it. I'm for art that takes its form from the dirty minds of the workers, but before we can savor it. I am for art that comes out of a choa barrel, but before we can savor it. I am for art that takes its form from the floors of the factory, but before we can savor it. I am for a world that remains closed, but before we can close it. I am for the art that comes out of a chimney, but before we can savor it. I am for the art from a car, but before we can savor it. I am for the art from a field, but before we can savor it. I am for the art from a field, but before we can savor it. I am for the art from a field, but before we can savor it. I am for the art from a field, but before we can savor it. I am for the secret handkerchief that serves me both as a handkerchief and as a secret code. Once opened, it is useless to lose the code. Ever heard of a code that can be decoded by an eavesdropper? This cipher allows me not only to eavesdrop, but also to make signs as I go. Is that what you are paying attention to? Look it up. In order to become accustomed to the idea of a code, one can hardly fall asleep. Whenever I get the chance, I will try to hear what has been happening.
We live in the present. Let us not let the future escape us as it has escaped every other man. Let us not let the present take a leaf out of the present. Let us not hold our breath. Let us take a leaf out of ourselves and paint our walls with the new words. I am an artist. I make art. I love art.